Let me ask you a question. What was the very first thing you did this morning, before you got out of bed, before you even turned off your alarm? If you're like I was, your hand reached for that familiar rectangle of light, a mindless, automatic gesture, a scroll through the digital stream before your eyes were even fully focused. For me, it was Instagram, then a quick hit of Twitter, a passive scroll through YouTube. It wasn't joy, it wasn't even curiosity, it was a compulsion, a itch I didn't even know I needed to scratch until I was already scratching it. And one evening, after losing 45 minutes to watching a stranger's vacation reel, then an argument in a comment section, then a sudden wave of anxiety about my own life not being photogenic enough, I had a moment of terrifying clarity. This wasn't a tool, it was a habitat, and I was drowning in it. So, I did the only thing that felt radical. I quit, not forever, just for 30 days. I deleted the apps, all of them. The first 48 hours were weirdly loud, not with noise, but with mental space. It was like moving out of a noisy apartment and into a silent, empty room. My brain kept sending little phantom impulses to my thumb. Pick up the phone, swipe, fill the silence. In line at the grocery store, my hand would literally twitch. That tiny pocket of boredom, which used to be instantly filled with content, was now a gaping void. And in that void, the first thing that rushed in wasn't peace, it was anxiety. What was I missing? A news story, a friend's announcement, a meme everyone would be talking about? The FOMO was physical, a low-grade hum in my nervous system. I realized social media wasn't just entertainment, it was a pacifier for my existential discomfort. And now, the pacifier was gone. Then, around day 4 or 5, something shifted. That vacuum started to fill with actual things. I finished a book that had been gathering dust on my nightstand for months. I mean, I really finished it. In long, uninterrupted stretches. I went for a walk without headphones, just listening to the world. And the most surprising thing? I was bored. Beautifully, profoundly bored. And out of that boredom, tiny sparks of creativity flickered. I dug out an old sketchbook. I started cooking complicated recipes just for the fun of it. I called my parents, not texted, called, and talked for an hour. The minutes and hours, which used to dissolve into the digital ether, suddenly had weight and texture. I was reclaiming the most non-renewable resource I had, my attention. And it felt less like I was depriving myself, and more like I was recovering something I had lost. But what about connection? That's the big promise, right? Stay connected. Here's what I found. My quantity of interactions plummeted. No more likes, no more DMs, no more superficial comments, but the quality of my real-world interactions intensified. When I met a friend for coffee, I didn't already know the headline events of their life from their stories. I had to ask, "So, what's new with you?" and actually listen to the answer. Conversations went deeper because we weren't just confirming narratives we'd already curated online. There was a vulnerability in not knowing, and a presence in truly listening. I also started to notice the people around me who were still plugged in. At a dinner, watching someone's eyes glaze over as they subtly checked their phone under the table. I'd been that person. I saw now how that tiny act was a door closing on the present moment, on the person in front of them. My social life hadn't ended. It had just relocated from the broadcast tower to the living room. The single biggest change was inside my own head. I started to think of my mind as having its own weather, and before, it was like I was living in a climate controlled by a chaotic, algorithmically driven storm system. 1 minute, sunshine from a heartwarming video. The next, a thunderstorm of outrage from a political post. Then a cold fog of comparison seeing someone's perfect life. My emotional state was on a roller coaster I hadn't even consented to ride. After 2 weeks offline, the weather settled, not into permanent sunshine, but into something more real, more mine. A quiet, steady baseline of calm. The constant low-grade anxiety, that feeling of being somehow behind, or not enough, just evaporated. I slept more deeply. My concentration, when I chose to focus on something, felt like a laser beam instead of a scattered flashlight. The mental chatter, the shoulds and the comparisons, quieted to a whisper. I was thinking my own thoughts again, not just rehearsing responses to the thoughts of others. That boredom I mentioned, it became a mirror. It forced me to confront a hard question, without the constant noise. Who was I? What did I actually enjoy? Not what I performed enjoying for an audience, but what genuinely brought me quiet satisfaction. It was uncomfortable, sometimes. In that silence, my own insecurities or unresolved thoughts would surface. There was nowhere to scroll to escape them. I had to just sit with myself. And that, I learned, was the real work. Social media had been the ultimate avoidance tool, a shield against introspection. Without it, I had to start making peace with the person I was when no one was watching, no one was liking, no one was following. With this new distance, I could see the mechanics of it all with terrifying clarity. I thought about the algorithm, this invisible, omnipotent force that had been curating my reality. It fed me content that made me angry to keep me engaged. It showed me idealized lives to make me insecure. It turned my friendships into a metrics dashboard. I hadn't just been a user, I had been a product, and my attention was the commodity being sold. Stepping away was like stepping out of a funhouse mirror maze and seeing my actual reflection for the first time in years. The world itself seemed slower, less frantic, less performative. The news reached me in fuller, deeper articles, not in frantic, decontextualized fragments designed to trigger me. I was no longer living in the feed, I was just living. Day 30 arrived. The experiment was technically over. I could re-download the apps, and I did, but with a profound sense of trepidation. Logging back in was surreal. It was all still there, the same memes, similar arguments, new versions of the same dances, but it felt distant, like watching the chaos of a crowded party from behind a thick pane of glass. The spell was broken. I had my data back, my mental health was better, my time was richer, my real connections were stronger. So I made rules. No phone in the bedroom, designated check times, not a constant drip feed. I ruthlessly unfollowed anything that didn't inspire, inform, or genuinely connect. I turned off almost all notifications. I became a visitor in that world, not a resident. So, did I go back? In a limited way. Yes, it's the town square. It's where events are posted, but I don't live there anymore. Quitting for 30 days wasn't about declaring social media evil. It was about diagnosing a dependency. It was a reset button for my brain. I learned that my attention is the most valuable thing I own, and I will never again hand it over so freely. The silence I was so afraid of on day one, it's now the most precious thing I have. It's where my own thoughts, my creativity, and my peace get to speak, and I'm finally listening. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel for more discipline topics.